Okay, this is a recording of my narration of this, basically these pictures that I took on my trip to Zambia. I did, of course, go on behalf of Zambian Mission Project and was very happy to do it and excited about the trip and had a lot of things to learn. And so this is really just a portion of um, my feedback to the board and just give you some ideas and pictures of the things that I saw while I was there and kind of what my thoughts were as I was going through this. So, the I am not the best at taking pictures, but I did try to catch some pictures along the way. I just sometimes forget to take pictures of things. But as I had got to Zambia my first day, and I was traveling with a group of guys to my hotel down in Lusaka, the capital city there. It was near sunset. We had stopped at a mall and eaten at a little restaurant called Hungry Lion, which basically we got fried chicken there, and so we ate together, and it was my first time beginning to get to meet and get to know the board members. And we left the mall and started heading to the hotel where I was going to be dropped off. And there was just so much to take in. There was so much to see. And so as we went along, I started trying to capture a few pictures just on my way to the hotel, which was just a little overwhelming. There was just way more to see than what I could do. So these are just some of my initial photos. And so here actually is a little video that I thought I would share, which you can see a lot of people walk with some speed bumps. You can hear Sandwell in the background. And notice we are on the opposite side of the road here. A lot of people walking. All of the places, the businesses and places, are inside of walls, which I just describe as like compounds. So you can see all along the road here. They're just every place there's a business or something, there's just compounds, and so lots of lots of people, new environment, and this was sort of my just very first experience with it. Let's. I did see a couple of things that just like stood out to me. The the buildings were there was some storefronts, but that there was not much concrete in front of them. The pavement on the roads was good. That the roads that we drove on that were actually paved were actually pretty good, but there was very little pavement anywhere else, like or even gravel. And you can see here's a business place that's closed down, and it was just something that kind of stood out to me. Japan or Japanese auto parts and spare accessories, but you can see very run down the front of the building here. And One of the other things I thought found was kind of ironic as I was going down. I was just curious. With these looked like some people had just hung up some coats, but this was just pretty close to my hotel. But there was this little sign up here: "Keep Lusaka clean," and that is a huge struggle that they have in Lusaka. A lot of people litter, and there's quite a bit of litter around. And it's a beautiful country. Zambia is a beautiful country, but one of the things, if you go there, that you'll be kind of taken back, because this is the capital city right here, is just sort of the cultural difference, the cultural attitude towards litter is somewhat different. So that was just a little bit of a different experience for me. So here was my a view from my hotel. Now I felt very pampered by staying at the Best Western, and now there was a swimming pool. I never swam. It was actually kind of a little bit on the cool side while I was there because it was winter, and the highs were like maybe in the low 80s, and the lows at night got down to like the 50s. But that was their winter, and this was like my initial view out the window of my hotel. And This was the next morning where I was actually getting up, getting ready to go to a meeting with the board, with Sandwell and the rest of the board. And you can see here, this is actually the downtown area of Lasaka. I don't know if you can see that, so I'll just put a little pin here. So this region over here is kind of the downtown area. Um, there's Later on, we had a meeting with the Minister of Community Development, and that was over back behind this. This building here looks somewhat like a um, nuclear place, but I'll come back and show a picture of that in a little. Now here's the Zambian flag right here, and I'm gonna actually I'll get the laser pointer. I don't have to write on it. So here's the Zambian flag, but you notice here, even larger than the Zambian flag, is the Chinese flag, and over here is a sign across the road advertising the Bank of China. And that was one of the things that occurred over and over again. People would talk to me about how they felt like China was taking over their country, and these were Zambians. So it was kind of an interesting thing that even at my hotel there was the Chinese flag was larger than even the Zambian flag, and then the American flag is way over on the other side. There's three flags here. Way over on the other side is the American flag. So kind of an interesting juxtaposition there. So here's a picture of that um, uh, looks like a nuclear cooling stack. I spoke to people about it. They said it had just been a like grain storage facility. I don't know if it was ever some kind of power plant at some point. Um, One person did say it was associated with power, so maybe at some point it was. It didn't seem to be active while I was there, so but it was right outside my window. And over here, like you can see, the American flag is on the far side and not quite as large as the Chinese flag. So I suspected that at least the Best Western there was probably had a substantial Chinese investment influence in the at that hotel. So anyway, this was a nighttime shot from my window, and here was a picture out front, a little mural, and it actually has a very Asian sort of look to it, which led me to also suspect that possibly a very strong Asian influence there in that hotel. Here was the picture of the front, and it was a very nice place to stay. I was very blessed to stay here, and I'm just very thankful. And so here is just another picture of the front of the hotel. Now, the next day, my second day in Zambia, I traveled to meet with our board. And in this journey, as we were driving down the road, I saw a lot of things. One thing I saw was a young man, and I saw a number of people doing this kind of thing on the side of the road. And he's building what is basically the gate to one of these compounds. And like everything is compounds, there's a big market for these gates. And so people would be right on the side of the road, um, basically just building stuff. And there were along the side of the road there was a lot of like goods and things for sale. Um, there also is a fair amount of unemployment in Zambia, which I learned about, and I'm suspecting that these are some of the unemployed guys. Or, but there were just a lot of people that at times you just see sitting around that just didn't seem to have any work to do. I thought this was kind of interesting. This was they call it a chemist, but this would be like a pharmacist here in Zambia. And then, as you can see, the route that we were taking was just a lot of people. I mean, had to go pretty slow because there was just lots of people. There were markets, there was tomatoes and onions. You can see here, just lots of. I mean, interestingly, though, to me, the weather was really nice. But you can see here, Zambians are somewhat cold natured, and so even in this was probably a 75 or 80-degree day, they were wearing hooded sweatshirts. So I thought that was interesting. Here was some dried fish that I grabbed a shot of on the way. And then here you can just see driving down the roads that not paved, just dirt, very rough, and then also just a lot of garbage that had just been kind of left behind there. And this I took a picture of. You can barely see it here, but this is a chicken. And so this car had stopped at this intersection, and this gentleman here had handed a chicken into the back seat of the car. They checked it out. Apparently it was either too expensive or not a good chicken, so they handed it back to this guy and drove on. But I asked the driver, who was a very nice young man named Wayo, like about these kinds of things. I'm like, what's going on here? And he would give me um, information. And so one of the things I saw this sign a number of times in Zambia that in Lusaka, the water supply, there was a water supply sanitation project that was funded by us. So to some extent, I don't know how much funding um, uh, by America goes into Zambia, but at least some does. And so that's something I was actually very proud of. Here we finally got back out onto concrete. We're headed to Pastor Isaac's house, and we're on pavement. And it was kind of nice to get to be on pavement. Driving down these little roads like this were very unnerving to me because people were so close. You're driving right down the middle of people. The roads. This was kind of a wide road. Actually, I took this picture because Wayo pointed out to me that from here you could see the American Embassy. So this is the American Embassy on the far side of Lusaka from where we were. Now, here we were basically right near Pastor Isaac's house. This was like the road out in front of his house, and you can see very narrow. Um, and all of the houses in his neighborhood, which was very extensive, were basically these compounds. And so in his compound, there were, and actually, after we met for a few hours in the morning, and then his wonderful wife Miriam served us a traditional Zambian meal. I got to eat in Shima again, which Sandwell made for us once while he was staying with us here in America. This is Sandwell, for those of you who don't know, and here is Pastor Isaac. And basically, Luca is taking the picture, so he's like the photo guy. He was taking the picture for us, but we were posing with our plates of food, and we had lots of delicious food that Pastor Isaac's wife Miriam had made for us. A very kind, kind lady, and I just enjoyed visiting with them and being in their home. It was very kind of them to have me there. But we spent quite a bit of time here just talking about the vision of the um, the the project going forward. And so this was a really very productive time, and I got to ask a lot of questions. And these guys have a lot of good ideas, and they're just a really awesome group of young men that I was just honored to begin to get to know better. So it was just a lot of fun. And you can see, as traditional African fashion or Zambian fashion with Nshima, I actually did eat with my hands. So that was kind of a new thing for me. And but we had, this was just another shot of that same scene. And now Pastor Tom had sent some books for Sandwell, and so, but I didn't know what to really bring for them, so I had brought some candy. I'd asked Sandwell if they, and I brought like assorted American candy, and then I also brought some candy bars, which aren't in this picture, but just to try to bring something that maybe they weren't able to easily get there in Zambia. And this is Pastor Isaac's daughter in the foreground, the back of her head, and her name was Grace, and she was very beautiful little girl, and I just was very honored to be in Pastor Isaac's home. And so we were about to leave, and we're getting ready to take a picture here in front of Pastor Isaac's home. This is a home that he rents, and you can actually see here on the stoop here, the steps, some rugs. And I was informed later by Samuel that these are rugs that Isaac had actually made himself. And so I talked with him later about getting him to make some rugs for me. And so I'm working together with him to try to get that, but he is very talented to do this and is quite artistic. And um, as you'll see a little bit later on. And so here's beautiful Grace, um, Isaac's daughter, and she's like trying to figure me out the whole time. She's like, what is this white guy doing in my house? But she was very sweet and very kind to me. So I really enjoyed getting to meet her and her family. Um, this is the group that was there. Now, Pastor Dixon is not in this picture, but this is Pastor Isaac, of course, Sandwell, and Luca, Pastor Luca, and this is Grace down here, and then this is Miriam up here. Both just wonderful people. I just enjoyed so much getting to meet them and visit with them. It was just a really good time. And so the next day, we actually had the opportunity. Now, here's Pastor Dixon. He was able to make it the next day to meet with us. And we met with a gentleman from the Ministry of Community Development and Social Welfare, I believe. was the name, and his name was Maximilian, and he met with us to talk about orphan care in Zambia, and he shared with us some documents, and he just had lots of good information. He was a very kind person. He's very interested in uh, the, the health and well-being of orphan and children at risk. And so he was a very gracious with his time. He actually had a meeting to go to, but he carved out over an hour to meet with us in the morning before he had to leave on his trip. So a big thanks to Maximilian and his time that he spent with us. This was very informative to help us understand what the government of Zambia is thinking of in terms of orphan care and whatnot. And I will share more with that with you guys in person. This was a little vehicle that we rented. It was a Toyota Voxy. We had a wonderful driver named Yo, and he drove us around. And this was our main mode of transportation. And I sat mostly in the front up here, as they would, they would, they wanted to give me the guest of honor position. So it was very kind of them. And Yo is a wonderful driver, and I had a great time riding around Zambia with him. He did at one point. He asked me if I'd like to drive by the University of Zambia. So this is the largest university in Zambia, and so he drove me around. They're actually, while I was there, they were having some issues in the university system, but it sounded like with the students were really upset with one administrator who had closed a branch university up in the Copper Belt, and so there was a little bit of issue there. But you can see Confucius Institute, the sort of presence, the big presence of China on the campus of the University of Zambia here. This was just a building. We were turning around here, and then the next day was the day we were going to drive out to the land. So basically, um, what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop the video here, and I'd like to do this as part one, and I'll come back and do a part two that will begin with our time at the land. So this was just kind of like my first couple days in Zambia, and then I got there on a Thursday, and Friday I met with the board, and then well, no, I'm sorry. I got there on Thursday, met with the board. Friday I did got to meet with the minister of community development, and then on Saturday we drove to the land. So I will pick up on the next part with this slide in our drive to the land.